Consider Amendment 1506, log number 1506, offered by Ms. Cheney. For what purpose does the gentlewoman seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Will the clerk please distribute the amendment? And without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady is recognized for the purpose of explaining her amendment. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this amendment restores the $52 million in funding that was cut for the B-83 life extension activities. President Biden requested money in fiscal year 22 for surveillance of the B-83 as well as to life extend the system. However, the chairman's mark cut $52 million for the life extension. This amendment would restore those funds with resources that we would shift from the DoD facility defense-wide maintenance account. Again, the amendment simply restores resources that were requested in the president's budget, money that Admiral Richard has testified that he needs, specifically focused on being able to penetrate and get after hard targets. The B-83 is needed to meet current policy guidance and the operation plan objectives, as we've heard from STRATCOM. As you know well, as the committee knows, our adversaries, particularly China, Russia, and North Korea, protect much of what they value most in hard and deeply buried facilities. Our adversaries continue to grow this class of targets. The B-83 is simply the very best weapon we have in denying that sanctuary to adversaries. STRATCOM assesses the B-83 is our most effective weapon against this class of targets. There are no other capabilities in our current force which are suitable replacements for the B-83-1 in this capacity. We know from open source reporting, as I said, that China in particular has been focused on burying targets far below the surface. A few years ago, a Georgetown study highlighted the extent to which China, President Xi, rely on hardened underground facilities. It's also safe to assume that Russian President Putin and Kim Jong-un as well have deeply buried facilities. If we're serious about deterring China, then we need to restore this funding. This amendment is an amendment very much focused on ensuring we have the resources we need if we need to target, in particular, weapons in China that have been buried. The B-83 has been in service for a long time, but it is one that is very much still needed. So again, my amendment would simply restore the funding that the president asked for this B-83-1 system, and I would urge my colleagues to support this amendment.
Is there debate on the amendment? I believe the gentleman from Rhode Island wants to be recognized in opposition to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do wish to speak in opposition to the amendment. So it is my understanding the B-83 gravity bomb was slated for retirement because it is the definition of a legacy weapon. Its utility really ended with the Cold War and has no place in our current arsenal. The system has no effect on our current nuclear deterrence posture. This 1.2 megaton bomb is the largest yield nuclear warhead in our arsenal. As a gravity bomb, its sole delivery system, the B-2 stealth bomber, must be essentially over the target to be effective. Of course, this introduces incredible risk to the pilots who will be ordered to drop it. On the other hand, we have a replacement in the B-61, which is more accurate with a lower yield. We also have ICBMs and cruise missiles that are more survivable and reliable. With the B-83, we have a weapon that unleashes massive, indiscriminate destruction with no additional strategic advantage. So therefore, for this and other reasons, I therefore oppose this amendment and would urge my colleagues to oppose it as well. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, if I could be recognized.
Mr. Turner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you recognizing me. I'm sorry, I'm in and out on service, so I hope that that you can hear me. We always go through a very intensive posture review for nuclear weapons. There's never been a posture review that's indicated that this was not a weapon that was needed for deterrence. There is nothing else that can do this purpose. As we've seen, anybody who's been on the Armed Services Committee, who has been in any classified briefing, should be absolutely concerned about what Russia and China are currently doing in the expanse of their weapon systems, tying our hands behind our back to limit the capabilities that we have would be very ill-advised at this point. Also, I always say this every time we have one of these hearings. During markup, why should we eliminate something for which we're getting nothing from our adversaries? This is unilateral disarmament by taking away something that we currently have and utilize and need. I hope that everyone supports this amendment. I appreciate Liz's description of this. Let's not table for us to do, and then if there's any negotiations that result in a reduction, let's at least attain some concessions on behalf of our adversaries. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Mr. Garamendi is recognized.
First of all, Mr. Turner, I hope everything is okay with you in Ohio. For all of us, I think we need to ponder for a moment the reality that we are very seriously into probably the 7th or 8th year of a nuclear arms race. There was a period of time where we were moving away from nuclear arms, but for the last half decade and more, we're well into it. And this time around, the delivery systems are all designed not to be observed. We're building delivery systems that are not to be observed. So are the Chinese and the Russians. In addition to that, we are totally dependent on space to understand what is happening. And we now know that we have a space force because we know that there could very well be a space war. And so the risk has escalated substantially over the last decade. And we need to pause for a moment and consider each of these nuclear amendments in the context of that nuclear arms race, in the context of new delivery systems that are stealth, and in the context of the reliance on space to provide us with the warning as well as the communications. This particular amendment, or this particular amendment to restore the funding for the B-83 just puts us down the path of a very expensive life extension program on this particular weapon. As was stated a moment ago by Mr. Langevin, this is a gravity bomb meant to be dropped from an airplane. There is no way that even the B-2 is going to be able to carry out the mission of dropping this weapon in Russia or China or any other place that has a sophisticated air defense system. Our new B-21 will use a standoff weapon, which is another debate point. So what are we doing here with this life extension program of this particular weapon? It is not necessary. There is a replacement. We can debate the value of that replacement, but it is designed to be targetable. This weapon is not. And so the base bill is proper in deleting the funding for this life extension program. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Are there any other members who seek recognition? Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to echo Mr. Turner's comments on this. And I've said this in many hearings that we've had. We should follow the advice on the military commanders, the people who have more knowledge of these things than we do. And we're not doing that. We need to follow this amendment, and we need to do what it asks for. There is no substitute at this time for the capabilities, and until we have a substitute for those capabilities, we shouldn't surrender those capabilities. I'm not saying that there's not a time in the future. I think there absolutely is, but I'm not a big believer in doing away with stuff for stuff in the future until we have that stuff in the future. We need this capability now, and until there's a replacement, we should rely on that. And so I ask to support the amendment, and I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Turner, and I yield back.
The gentleman has yielded back. Let me add a little bit to the debate myself. I hope members realize that the B-83 is really quite a niche weapon. There are hardly any of them, and as has been suggested, it has to be dropped over the target. It's a gravity bomb. The B-61 life extension program, the B-61-12, was designed to replace this. And if you go to the President Trump National Nuclear Posture Review, the exact wording in that was, the B-83-1 and the B-61-11 gravity bombs can hold at risk a variety of protected targets. As a result, both will be retained in the stockpile at least until there is sufficient confidence in the B-61-12 gravity bomb that will be available, they said, in 2020. The life extension program, the improvement for the B-61, has been underway now for 5 years. It's going very, very well. And with the new precision targeting, it has certain advantages over the old B-83. This is another issue that I'm worried falls in the category of fear-mongering, because after a year of subcommittee hearings, we had no discussion about this. No one brought it up. This is a surprise, issue at the full committee. And we have no information so far about what a life extension program for the B-83 would cost. It's likely to be, in the billions of dollars. So if the committee and if Congress wants to support that for such an extraordinary niche weapon that, even according to the Trump Nuclear Posture Review, is probably not even going to be needed due to the improved precision of the new B-61 with the new tail kit, which can hit the target so much more precisely than anything previous. So I'm a little bit worried that this is an amendment that's unnecessary and could lead us into an unintended multi-billion-dollar obligation. So I think I'm going to vote no, at least until the new administration's nuclear posture review is done. I don't know what they're going to conclude. It'll be out in about 6 months or less. Then we will have more guidance. But until then, I think it would be a mistake to commit Congress to a multi-billion-dollar extension for such a remarkably niche weapon. And if members would like more briefing on this from the subcommittee or from the Pentagon, they should indulge, because this is a technical issue of technical issues right here. And I don't want to commit billions unless I really know what we're doing. And I'm a little bit worried that it's just being brought up now at the full committee when we've had a whole year of subcommittee meetings in which this could have been discussed. So I would urge my colleagues to vote no. Is there subsequent discussion on the bill, on the amendment? Question is called. All those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Aye. All those opposed,
Aye.
no. 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 In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask for a recorded vote.
The gentlelady has asked for a recorded vote. It is so ordered. The next amendment will be Mr. Garamendi's 996, log 996.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to also thank you for the detailed hearings that you've conducted over the last many years, not just the last two, and the opportunity you've given us to engage in discussions as well as acquire information and knowledge about the nuclear situation. In your opening remarks for your subcommittee report, you said that your subcommittee deals with the most existential threat that this world faces, which is the nuclear weapons that are now possessed by multiple countries and particularly by three major companies. I spoke a moment ago about the new nuclear arms race that we are involved in. Another element in that arms race is the replacement of the Minuteman III missile with what is known as the GBSD, otherwise the Ground-Based Strategic Deterrent.
If I could interrupt the gentleman for a second, you need to say there's an amendment at the desk, apparently. That's what the parliamentarian is urging us.
Does that give me the opportunity to reclaim my 1.5
Yes.
minutes?
Just say, will the clerk please distribute the amendment?
Thank you.
Will the clerk
I have an amendment
please
at the desk.
distribute the amendment? Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. The chair recognizes the gentleman. Is there any debate on the amendment? The gentleman is debating it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate
Sorry.
the heads up on how to proceed. So one of the issues before the committee is whether we should spend
Call on the hotline there.
110 to 120 billion dollars over the next decade on replacing the Minuteman III missile with the new GBSD missile. I would point out to the committee that that contract for the GBSD was a no, there were no bidders. There was only one bidder for the contract. So we have one contractor doing this work. It's going to be well over 110 billion and perhaps well over 250 billion for the life of the missile. It is not necessary. This amendment would pause the deployment of the GBSD for 10 years, in which time the Minuteman III missile would be able to meet the commitment of the necessity of providing whatever deterrence the current Minuteman III and the GBSD would have. It is possible that the number of Minuteman IIIs would fall somewhat below 400 during that 10-year period, at the end of the 10-year period. However, it is also clear that the Minuteman III can be life extended for perhaps another 20 years. However, this would simply pause the GBSD program for 10 years. I notice that my time is out. It's unfortunate that the members of this committee, all of us, do not have the opportunity to engage on the extraordinary information that Mr. Cooper provides for those of us on the Strategic Arms Committee. With that, my time has expired and I withdraw this amendment.
Mr. Speaker,
The amendment is withdrawn. And don't go promoting me like that. I'm just the chairman.
oh, pardon me. Okay.
That's right.
You look like the speaker. No, pardon me. Mr. Chairman, may I speak on the amendment?
It has been withdrawn, so I think